Hello, everyone, and welcome to another LinkedIn Live Friday with me, Elizabeth Carter from the ICB, and my guest today is Mark Lee. Good morning, Lee. Good afternoon.
Lee? Oh, no, you can call me Mark. That's fine.
Right. Good morning, Mark. And so we invite people to come and chat to us on a Friday at 12 o'clock every Friday in the run up to the Bookkeepers Summit. So it's 3 weeks on Mondays. We've got another 4 of these coming along, and it's we just invite special guests to come and talk to us about what's coming up at the summit. If you are coming to the summit, that's great. You're going to get a taster of what's happening. If you're not coming to the summit, for goodness sake, book your tickets. It's Monday, the 11th of November at the Park Plaza Hotel in Westminster. You don't have to be an ICB member to join us. All bookkeepers are very, very welcome, and you receive a warm welcome from everyone there. So
it's a great venue as well. I've been a couple of times in the past. I love it.
And it's lovely to be there opposite Big Ben. It always makes you feel like you're in the centre of the universe, I think, when you're there. So Monday, 11th of November, and then we follow that up with the Luke Awards in the evening, which are the Oscars of the bookkeeping world. Then on Wednesday and Thursday, we run the virtual summit. We have a tech day on the Wednesday, and then we run a full summit on the Thursday. It's completely different content from the Monday event. But Mark, you are joining us for the in-person summit on Monday.
Absolutely. I was thrilled and slightly trepidatious. I don't know if that's a word, because you've kindly given me the final slot of the day. So I'm following on at the end after my good friend Paul Aplin and then Chris Downing as well. And that's a tough act to follow. I will rise to the occasion, but I'm aware of the pressure.
All roads lead to Mark Lee. The theme of the summit this year is all around the future of bookkeeping, and we're looking at all avenues around the future, whether that's the next 12 months, which, as we know, are going to be really big in 2026 with MTD, or we're looking at 5 years in the future, and we're going beyond that. Chris Downing's got a really good piece on that. So, Mark, you're going to be talking about the skills that bookkeepers need. Are you able to give us a bit of a sneak preview into what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, well, I'm going to focus much of what I say on a very special bookkeeper who I hope to be able to introduce on the day. Her name's Eleanor, and I think she really encompasses those skills that bookkeepers will need into the, let's say, the short-term future, 2 to 5 years. Whenever I talk to accountants or bookkeepers, that's sort of the time period that they're most interested in when we're sort of going into the future. And there are 3 areas, if you like, of skills that we need to think about that I'll be addressing in much more detail and in a fun way, I hope, as well. Client and relationship management skills and what's going to be changing there. Strategic and analytical expertise, and also leadership and project execution. And you know what? When I say it like that, it doesn't sound as exciting as I know it's going to be on the day.
I think they're all things that people know that they need to think about, especially the leadership one. And I think that's a really interesting thing for bookkeepers to think about, because a lot of bookkeepers work for themselves. They've got their own business, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to consider how you are a leader within your own business, does it?
Absolutely right. And also, if one can say, we talk about leading the witness, but actually leading clients, and the need to get clients to respect you. And part of how you carry yourself and the way you present yourself will have a big consequence in whether clients respect you, listen to your advice, take your advice. And we'll need to be doing more of that the more AI is getting involved and clients are thinking about AI. And I know other speakers are addressing that. The more important it is, and the better bookkeepers feel about themselves if they're able to present themselves in such a way that clients do respect them and listen to them, and enhancing the skills we have to do that. I think it's going to be even more important in the future than it has been to date. And the other thing that will also be really important, and it'll obviously be covered within those three three topics, is something that I call distinction marketing, which is how you present yourself so that people don't think of you as just another bookkeeper. And we'll look at ways in which we can do that as well. I've only got half an hour, so it'll be, I think it's only about half an hour. So it'll be a quick whiz through things, and there'll be something there for everybody. And I'll be finished, well, just before I finish, there will be a magic trick in there. You may have noticed the magic wand behind me there, fully paid up member of the Magic Circle. And it's a condition of membership that if you're on a stage, you have to perform a magic trick.
I mean, this is going to be brilliant. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we wanted you, because we knew we'd get some magic thrown in as well. So I think that's a really interesting point you made there about AI. That when we talked at ICB about making the future bookkeeping the theme for the conference this year, for the summit this year, what we wanted to make sure we do is just include AI as part of that. It's not the whole future of the profession. And I think that's what we were really interested in with your talk, is around skills and the skills that you need and how you use AI as much as anything else, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's recognizing that AI is a tool that helps us to be more efficient. And I often use the comparison of AI with spreadsheets. And if we go back in time to before spreadsheets, and some of the members will be old enough to remember a time before spreadsheets. But when spreadsheets came around, we thought, oh my goodness, they're going to take away a lot of the bookkeeping that needs to be done, a lot of the accounting that needs to be done. And we quickly learned to rely on spreadsheets. But what we never did, I don't think, was we never said that spreadsheets are unreliable.
No.
What we recognized is that if spreadsheets got the wrong answer, it's because we'd coded them wrong. And it was human error. And when I talk about AI in passing, which is all I ever do, I'll leave that to the experts. But when I talk about AI in passing, I always pick up on this fact that there will always be accountants and bookkeepers in the audience looking at me and going, Mark, how can you talk about us using AI? It's unreliable. It makes things up. It hallucinates. And we don't know where it gets the information from. Now, in my experience, we've only had ChatGPT and other types like that for a couple of years, but in my experience, when it goes wrong, it's because we didn't prompt it properly. We need to learn how to prompt the AI in the same way that we had to learn best practice with spreadsheets. The best example with spreadsheets being never put an embedded formula into a spreadsheet. And there are similar things with prompts for AI as well, so that we can rely on it to get what we want from it, using it as a tool rather than an alternative solution to a real life bookkeeper.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sage are doing some really interesting things with Copilot. And this year at the Inspire roadshows that we had earlier in the year, Chris Downing just gave a really great masterclass all around the best prompts to use, because, like you say, it's all about the information that goes in, isn't it?
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, as with all booking. Okay. Yes. So can I just go back a little bit in terms of your presence at the summit, and in terms of what your background is, because I know you're extremely well known within the accountancy marketplace, and you've done lots of work with bookkeepers. But perhaps for we've got a lot of new delegates this year, which is fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and where your focus is as well within the industry?
Well, by way of background, I started life as a children's party entertainer, as all good accountants and bookkeepers do, hence the magic. Quickly realised that I wasn't going to be able to earn a decent living doing magic, so I trained and qualified as a chartered accountant. Then moved into tax for many years, but also got into training, tax training and budget updates and all the rest of it. And I was fortunate enough to be headhunted a couple of times. I was lecturing around the country. But in 2006, I experienced redundancy for the second time and thought, you know what? I don't want to go back to being a tax partner again. I want to focus on those elements of my career that I really enjoy. It is so scary to think that that is 18 years ago now. But since 2006, I focused on doing the things I enjoy most, which is speaking, writing, and mentoring. So addressing audiences of accountants, tax advisors, bookkeepers. I write a weekly blog on my website. I post on LinkedIn 3 to 5 times a week. If we're not already connected there and you're watching this LinkedIn live, then please reach out and connect with me. On there, you'll find me as Mark Lee FCA, because my name is so common. I have to make it easy for people to find me. There's over 5,000 Mark Lees on LinkedIn, so I've got to make it easy. And my tag on LinkedIn is Bookmark Lee, which is the same as my website, and indeed my business card is a bookmark. I'll have some of these at the conference. If anybody wants a bookmark, you're very welcome to have one. It's got full details of links to my website, my blogs, and everything else, and to free reports and free stuff on my website on there as well. But so I'm Bookmark Lee everywhere, and for the last 18 years, I've been mentoring sole practitioners. I run a club for sole practitioner accountants. I also co-host with Philippa Haynes of Insight 101, the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. And it's very informal, and we've had a number of bookkeepers on there because, frankly, bookkeepers are doing a lot of accounting as well, in the same way that some accountants do some bookkeeping. The hard and fast lines that one might imagine don't always exist there.
And I think they're going to merge even further next year as well, as we take 1.7 million businesses into MTD. So there's lots of opportunity there, isn't there? So in that time then, Mark, can you talk a little bit about the changes you've seen in the industry, and specifically around bookkeepers, and perhaps we then think about what we think is going to be coming up in the future?
Yes, well, when I started training, we didn't even have pocket calculators. Yes, yeah, we had. There were ladies in the office. I'm afraid they were ladies. They used machines called comptometers, and you had comptometer people, and they would tap 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 tap, a bit like a sort of cash register. If you remember what they were like, and that enabled them to downcast and crosscast numbers very quickly. We had spreadsheets. So before spreadsheets, we had analysis pads. You either had a 7-column analysis pad or a 14-column analysis pad. That was really cool.
I'm interested to know if other people listening are familiar with these things, and so if anyone's watching who had an analysis pad, and a lot of people will still use analysis pad, won't they?
This was before spreadsheets, and then we started getting spreadsheets, and I started with Lotus 1, 2, 3, and then everything became pretty much Excel. Although I use Google Sheets a lot now because I don't need anything very sophisticated, and it means I can access it from anywhere and everywhere. And we then went to saving everything on floppy disks. We had sort of floppy disks that were about that sort of size, and then they went down to sort of 3-inch disks and mini disks. And then we moved into the cloud. And before we moved into the cloud, of course, we had the internet, and that meant we could access all sorts of knowledge and information. And we could start having conversations in online forums with other bookkeepers or other accountants. And I spend most of my online time on LinkedIn because that's where most of my target audience are, be that people who are going to book me to speak at conferences and events and webinars, or accountants who want to be better remembered, referred and recommended, might join my sole practice club, approach me for mentoring or whatever. But I also spend a fair amount of time in certain Facebook groups with accountants and bookkeepers, because there are so many active in those groups, where you get the camaraderie, the support, the clarification. You can ask the simple questions. You can ask complex questions as well, and people will help you. And this, I think, is a phenomenal facility. And I know the ICB hosts one of these groups as well. And I think it is a
Yeah.
wonderful way of helping ensure bookkeepers are not left out by themselves.
Yes, and certainly, well, we have the branch network as well. ICB has a really
Yes.
proficient branch network, and we had something like 14 branch meetings this month alone. It's been really busy. Another thing that Jasmine covers. Jasmine does do everything. What somebody said to me about having a branch is when you work on your own, as a lot of people do, that it's really nice to have that you can lean over the back of the chair and say, what do you think about this? You know, what I'm just about to do this. Have you done that? And so that sense of community is really important.
It very much is. And actually, you remind me of a story that I often share with accountants and bookkeepers. We're talking about recruiting staff. And when I was recruiting people, which I did for many years when I was in practice, I always said at the start of an interview, I'd say, later on, I'm going to ask you what may seem like a strange question. And I'm going to tell you what it is now, but I will ask you this later on. Just let your subconscious work on it. I'm going to ask you if you could describe yourself using 3 adjectives. People go, what? I said, don't worry about it now. We'll come to it later. And then later in the interview, I'd ask them if they could describe themselves using 3 adjectives. The same thing happened every time. Everybody would come up with 2 answers and then pause for a minute. What should the third one be? And they'd say things like hardworking, collegiate, value focused, or commercial. There'd be a couple. And the best answer I ever had was somebody said, well, I could say I'm commercial, but maybe I'll say that I look out for the firm as well as for the clients. And then the second one, I'm hardworking, but I'm realistic as well. And in other words, he understood that what I was actually getting at was to get more information about them than might have come through from conventional interviewing. But the reason I mention it, because you prompted it just now, was I had one lady who said that she was hardworking. She was very punctual, I think. But the third one, she said, and I'm very talkative. And I thought, right, that's not a positive quality to highlight in an interview, but I did what I always do, which I went back and I always asked for clarification. What do you mean by hardworking? What do you mean by punctual? What do you mean by talkative? And on talkative, she said she'd already talked herself out of the job by now, because on punctual, she said, I arrive dead at 9 o'clock and I always make sure I leave.
Okay.
Okay. But on the talkative one, she said, well, I get a bit bored during the day and I sort of lean back in my chair and have a bit of a chat with whoever's behind me, or if there's somebody sitting opposite me, I'll have a bit of a chat with them during it. I like to have a chat with my colleagues during the day. And I thought, well, you've been very honest. I would have added honest to your list of but you've talked your way out of this job. I obviously didn't say that, but I'm remembering that from probably 30 years ago. So anyway,
I think that sounds like my school report, really, Mark, being talkative. Always willing to make contribution in class, right? But in terms of community, the talking thing is very important, isn't it? And that's what we notice again and again, and that's what people say about ICB events, but not just ICB events. I know, Natasha Everard, for example, who's speaking at the virtual summit and is up for an award at the ICB as well. She runs an amazing community of accountants and bookkeepers. I come from a background working with accountants, and I've moved into the bookkeeping world over the last couple of years. My initial feeling was that bookkeepers are more focused on community than accountants, but that accountants might be catching up now. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're right. Bookkeepers do. There seems to be a greater sense of community with bookkeepers, particularly within the ICB. I admit, I only really started to understand bookkeepers versus accountants, if not that we really talk about that, when Intuit flew me out to San Diego or somewhere in 2017 as a some expert commentator or whatever. I'm very flattered and touched. The only time in my life I've ever flown business class. It was wonderful. But what I realized was the vast majority of the audience, an intuitor behind QuickBooks Online, the vast majority of the audience were bookkeepers rather than accountants. And in the States, it's the bookkeepers who are recognized as the advisors to businesses rather than accountants. And I came back after that thinking, oh, that's very interesting. And then I started looking at it more here, and I realized that actually it's true here as well. Bookkeepers are in a position, when they're in regular contact with their clients, they're in a much better position to help clients with advice. And one reason why accountants haven't done it so much is because if their clients have got an external bookkeeper, so the bookkeeper is answering the client's questions more than the accountant. And yes, and there are 3 types of accountant, if you like. This is not a joke. There are 3.
3 accountants walk into a bar. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew where that was going. So you've got those that are members of one of the major bodies, if you like, ICAW, ACCA, ICAS, or whatever. And they tend to have branch and regional events, much the same as ICB does. You've then got those who are members of another organization that doesn't have an examination structure, but it gives a degree of camaraderie and support. And they probably have regional, well, I know some of them do have regional and group meetings. And then you have the third category of accountants, those who don't have a professional qualification and are not a member of a professional body. But as we know, anyone can call themselves an accountant, which is why so many bookkeepers, quite understandably, might describe themselves as accountants and bookkeepers. I don't know that accountants are becoming more collegiate in the same way as bookkeepers. I think what's happening is through online groups and forums, it is easier, particularly for those who don't live close to somewhere where there was a branch or regional event. And I think it is fantastic that people who choose not to live in a sort of a major conurbation or major city can be part of a community in a way that wasn't possible 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also as well with the bookkeepers, they're more likely to have those regular conversations, aren't they, with their clients? You think about them being advisors, and what we're seeing our bookkeepers at ICB do, and bookkeepers across the board, is use the technology, use the software to streamline their processes so much that they've got more bandwidth, they've got more capacity in order to become that advisor. And they're also trusted as well. So one of the biggest growth areas for us as ICB is that we're getting more payroll professionals involved than ever before. And that's, I think, a lot to do with the fact that if you're a bookkeeper and you're working very closely with a business, then you're going to be trusted to take on the payroll. There's nothing more important than payroll for the working person, is there? You mess up the payroll, then you're in real trouble. So yes, we've seen that change.
And the point I would add about being trusted is, and I know ICB stresses this as well, is being ethical and honest and having the self-confidence and self-worth when you admit you don't know something, being prepared to admit you don't know something, but you'll find out, and then going away finding out. Do not, whatever you do, try and guess and fudge it or budget or whatever, because you damage your own reputation. You also damage the reputation of other members of the ICB and other qualified bookkeepers as well, and that's a huge shame. And it invariably comes from a position either of arrogance, which is horrible, or from a position of a lack of self-worth and a lack of self-confidence. We need to boost both of those feelings of self-worth and self-confidence so that people are willing and able to admit when they don't know something.
Yeah, I don't think I know many arrogant bookkeepers. I can't say the same about other people in other other professions, but I haven't met any arrogant bookkeepers. And that's certainly with ICB in terms of our standards. We're really very, very proud of having really difficult exams. Somebody posted this morning actually about I'm not going to be able to remember now, but about just passing the next level of exams and how hard it was, and getting a distinction, and starting off and not knowing anything. And it's such an achievement. It's such an achievement when people pass every single one of those exams. But also it's why we have comprehensive helplines. You can pick up the phone and speak to somebody if you're a member of ICB, and that, experts on various things from tax and payroll and things like that. And in terms of the self-confidence, we find that events like the summit and opportunities to network help that enormously as well. So Linda Owen, who I know is coming to the summit, she's just put on here that having a community increases the confidence of to increase the confidence of a bookkeeper is awesome, and definitely helps client relationships too. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. The idea that you have confidence in your that's driven by your community as well.
Yeah, very true.
So I'm going to wrap things up now, but I do have to, when I do these lives, I always like to ask for your input on some of the Luca finalists. So for those of you who don't know, the Luca Awards are the Oscars of the bookkeeping world, and we announce them on the Monday evening of the Bookkeepers Summit. There are awards for bookkeepers, which are judged, and there are awards for software vendors as well. But as part of the software vendors, bookkeepers can vote for it, and we nominate for the Bookkeepers Champion of the Year, which was the Bookkeepers Personality of the Year. So, Mark, you know the industry well, so I wanted to get your input on who you think is going to be crowned the Bookkeepers Champion this year. Are you prepared to make a decision today?
Well, I can make a guess. I would imagine I've never judged the Lucas. I've judged lots of accounting and tax awards over the years, and I was always of the view we should say if you've won it one year, you can't win it the next year, because otherwise you end up with the sort of the Ant and Dec awards where they win the same thing every year. So my guess would go to for Natasha Everard or Chris Downing.
Well, Chris Downing hasn't. So the Bookkeepers Champion finalists, if you don't know, are Chris Downing of Sage, Joe Wood from Six Figure Bookkeeping, Johan Gorey, who set up Engager and also does the Ask the Accountant podcast. Johan and Aaron are going to be at the summit as well. They're going to be doing a special Ask the Bookkeeper podcast, so we're looking forward to having them around. Kirsty St. John, who is the chair of the Advisory Council and did win it last year, actually, Mark, and Natasha Everard, and who leads the community, a really big Facebook community as well. So it's a really well-known.
Joe Wood's quite high on my list as well.
Joe Wood's high on the list as well. So Chris has definitely won it before, and Kirsty has won it before. So I don't know if there are any.
So it's Natasha or Joe then.
Well, I don't know if there are any rules about not winning before. And my thing is, I try not to get involved with any of the. I'm certainly not involved in any of the judging, but I like to just be given the winners at the same time as everyone else, because firstly, I find it too emotional, because we're all very involved at ICB with our members, and secondly, I really enjoy it on the night to find out, and I like the speculation as well.
Do you know, in all the awards I've judged, I invariably sit at the judges' table afterwards when the awards are announced, and I'll say to fellow, do you remember who won this one? Because I deliberately don't make a note so I can have that pleasure on the night, even when I was one of the judges.
Yeah. Well, the way we do our awards, I do know this, is that the judges judge independently, so they don't even know; they just score their own. And if there's a tie break, then our chair of judges, Graham Hambley, has to decide. It's up to him. But I think one of the reasons that the Lucas is seen it, well, one of the reasons it's seen as the Oscars of the bookkeeping world is because we are very stringent in terms of letting the judges get on with it completely, because they're the experts and they know. Right. Okay. So I'm going to draw to a close now. Thank you for your time, Mark. If you want more of Mark Lee, you have your podcast that you do with a friend of ICB, Philippa, don't you? Can tell us about how can you find about that?
the Accountant Success Secrets podcast. We broadcast as LinkedIn Lives. It's also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. The Accountant's Success Secrets podcast, or just connect with me on LinkedIn and I can send you a link to it.
Great. And also Mark will be joining us for the ICB Bookkeepers Summit, Monday, the 11th of November in London. You can get your tickets. As I've said, you don't need to be an ICB member to join us. All bookkeepers are very, very welcome. If you can't make it to London, please do join us via the virtual summit, and tickets for the virtual start from 99 quid.
And in addition to the summit, there's also an exhibition, isn't there?
Yes, there is an exhibition, yes.
Yeah. So it's a great way of finding out the latest software and talking to the vendors.
Yes. And that, well, this time next week, I'll be speaking to Jordan Vickery from Journey. And for those of you who don't know, Journey are champion lots of new vendors in the accounting and bookkeeping space. So we're going to be talking about some of the exhibitors there, because we've got lots of new vendors coming. We're really pleased to have the support of the big names. You know, we've got Xero, we've got Apron, we've got Iris, we've got Intuit QuickBooks, we've got Sage, and we've got Free Agent. Just think I've got more, yes, and Dext all supporting us. And then we have lots of new ones as well, lots of smaller vendors, little Tax Calc, Bright, people like that. They're all going to be there. So come along and see the ones that you know, but also discover the ones you don't know. So that'd be great. Anyway, thank you. I hope everybody has a lovely weekend, and please let us know if you're going to be joining us at the summit. Get in touch with us if you've got any questions. You know where we are. But have a wonderful weekend, and thank you, Mark.
Absolute pleasure. See you on the 11th.
See you on the 11th.